Scott Peterson, serving a life sentence for the 2002 murders of his wife Laci and unborn son Connor. After more than 20 years, he still claims he didn't do it. And now he's breaking his silence in a new docuseries. With the LA Innocence Project taking over his case, DNA testing on a single piece of duct tape could give Peterson a new trial.
Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Ted Rowlands in tonight for Vinnie Politan, and we're going to begin tonight with a story that many of us have been following for more than 20 years now. Convicted killer Scott Peterson, of course, was found guilty of the murders of his wife Laci and unborn son Connor back in 2004. And since day one, he's always maintained that he had nothing to do with it. Now the LA Innocence Project is pushing for Peterson to get a new trial, and after their latest effort for new DNA tests, the judge has ruled sort of in their favor. Basically, she said no to testing the items except one. One single piece of duct tape found on Laci Peterson's body will be tested. And they're hoping that there's going to be some DNA and someone else might be found fingered for this double murder. But unlikely. We'll talk about that in a bit. Another development, for the first time since 2003, Scott Peterson is speaking out in his first on-camera interview in more than 2 decades as part of a new Peacock docuseries called Face to Face with Scott Peterson. The new 3-part series is premiering on Peacock August 20th. Take a look.
Thanks for talking with me today.
He didn't want to be a dad, didn't want to pay child support, didn't want to pay spousal, and this is the way he thought about getting out of it.
I believe my brother-in-law, Scott, has been wrongfully convicted of that murder. He's been in prison since April of 2003. Scott has not spoken on camera about the case in those 21 years.
Why should anyone care about what you have to say 20 years later?
The deeper you get into this case, the more questions you have. Now, a big reason that Scott Peterson was convicted was the testimony of Amber Frey. He was cheating on Laci with Amber Frey. She cooperated with investigators, recorded his phone conversations. And when she entered that courtroom, I was there for every day of this trial, she completely changed the case. Tonight, the attorney who represented Amber and came down that escalator with her, Gloria Allred, is with us. Also here, Deputy Public Defender of Los Angeles County, Philip Dubé. Good evening to both of you. Gloria, what's your take on Scott taking part in this documentary on Hulu? I don't know if you're in it or not, or Amber, but they're billing it as Scott's talking for the first time in 20 years. What could he say?
Well, I have a lot of questions for him and also for Peacock. He's not going to be testifying under oath. He never did testify under oath in this criminal case because he invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. He wasn't required to testify, and he chose not to testify. Now he's doing the Peacock documentary. I just want everyone to know he has no duty to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help him God, is not under oath in this documentary. Also, his conviction for murdering or homicide of Laci and also of the unborn fetus, Connor, was affirmed by the California Supreme Court. The only thing that was overturned was the death penalty. So now he's trying to get a new trial with DNA evidence on a number of items. But the judge recently found that all but one of those dozen or so items that the Innocence Project wanted to test should not be tested. Only, as was pointed out, only one item will be tested, and that's the tape that was found and that at the time of the autopsy on her pants. So that will be tested. So the real question is, why is he doing it? Because he lost in the court of law. I guess now he's appealing to the court of public opinion. Is he getting any money from this? Where is the money going? Is it going for attorneys? Is it going to him or to his sister-in-law who's pushing to get him a new trial? I'd just like to know the answer to these questions, because he's a convicted felon now facing a life sentence since the death penalty was overturned. And I just have questions about it.
Philip, why are we still talking about Scott Peterson? What is it about this case?
Well, first of all, he initiated a petition with the court. California passed a new law, relatively new, that authorized the testing of untested DNA, or DNA that may have been tested with flawed procedures at the time of the offense. So what he's doing is he's exercising his right. And you have to understand that in order to even exercise that right, it presupposes that the petitioner has already been convicted and is serving time in prison. So it's a prerequisite to the petition. And you have to understand that there is a piece of evidence that was not tested. It was a 15.5-inch strip of duct tape that was found adhered to Laci's pants that was lifted during the autopsy back in 2003. And the rich source of any DNA, and hopefully it's not Scott's, because if it is, we're going to close this out. Well, let's just pretend there's an unknown contributor on the sticky substrate, if you will, of that tape. It could show that somebody other than Scott Peterson is the culprit. The whole idea behind this statute allowing for testing for DNA is to determine the identity of the perpetrator. And if you have a piece of sticky tape stuck to a victim's body where DNA matches somebody other than Scott Peterson, then all the evidence about the affairs, not wanting to pay child support, not wanting to pay spousal support, and being a cad, it's all noise. Because at the end of the day, the science could set him free. Now, what this would do in the end, assuming he is successful in the lab, by the way, that strip, I believe, was sent to Pure Gold Forensics. It's a lab in Southern California. I think it's in the city of Redlands. But let's say they do find some donor other than Scott. What it would do is form the basis of a new trial of the guilt phase of his murder case. And we'll see. Right now, it's up in the air. I think the lab has approximately 45 days to conclude the testing and get the results to San Mateo Court under seal.
And they did actually test a bit of that piece of duct tape originally. They found DNA, but the defense successfully argued to the judge, hey, do it, we got to do it again. We have to do a different portion of it because the testing at that time was inferior to what we're dealing with now. Gloria, if that comes back, Joe Schmo that has nothing to do with anything and is, it's not the robbers across the street, or it's not someone who lived in Modesto at the time, does that give him enough traction for a new trial?
Well, that's going to be determined by the judge, Ted. And the question is, by the way, I don't have any problem with someone trying to prove that he's factually innocent if he can't prove it. But I do have a problem with the fact that he's doing a documentary. He's trying to have an impact on the court of public opinion. Maybe he thinks if he can get a new trial, this documentary will help him to prove that he should not have been convicted, that someone else did it. But let's mention, so to have an impact on the jury pool. But let's remember this. He was found to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean for a conviction that he has to be found guilty beyond any doubt whatsoever. That's not the burden of proof. That is not the standard in the law. And I'm sure your guest would agree with me on that. So if there is some doubt, it doesn't mean that it was wrong for the jury to prove, to find that he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But let's see what happens next. Let's see what the judge decides. Let's see what she thinks. She found that some of the evidence that the Innocence Project wanted to be tested, and which will probably be in the documentary, I haven't seen it, that she wouldn't allow to be tested, would not have affected the outcome of his criminal case or was not in a condition to be tested, or was not in police custody, so she didn't allow it. We'll see whether any of that changes when the evidence comes in on this duct tape.
Philip, the LA Innocence Project has basically said nothing about the fact that they are now representing Scott Peterson. What do you think made them take on this of all cases? Because, of course, you know, there's a huge interest in this case. What do you think? Why is there a there for them?
Well, first of all, I believe he reached out to them from prison and probably confided with them regarding items of evidence that he believes could exonerate him, that were either not tested before his trial or during his trial, or were tested with flawed procedures or with procedures that are far more advanced now. So what the Innocence Project does is they focus not on cases where there might be reasonable doubt, but on cases where there in fact may be proof of innocence. So for example, if all these items that they wanted tested could point to the identity of somebody else, then that could win Scott a new trial. And that's ultimately the end game, you know? And by the way, the LA Innocence Project has not been around that long. I believe it was created with a grant from a DNA exoneree back in 2022. He was exonerated, I believe, here in LA County after serving many, many years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And out of his utmost gratitude, he donated, I believe, $1 million to create this chapter, if you will, of the Innocence Project. And they partnered with Cal State Los Angeles and their California Forensic Institute. And the man who was exonerated was Andy Wilson, and I believe he won like $1.2 million from the California State Victim Compensation Board, and I think $14 million from the sheriffs and the LAPD, because he was wrongfully convicted, you know? So they have the resources, they have the will, and now let's see what unfolds.
Yeah, well, we will definitely see. Scott Peterson, he hasn't done interviews in a long time, in fact, I believe I was the last person to interview him 20 years ago. Here's some of the things that he said to not only me, but Diane Sawyer in that time period before he went to trial, and was trying to tell everybody, hey, I didn't do it. It was, I'm innocent. Take a listen.
Violence towards women is unapproachable. It is the most disgusting act to me. And I know that suspicion has turned to me.
What kind of marriage was it?
God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, you know, glorious. I mean, we took care of each other very well. She was amazing. She is amazing.
Another story that is out there is that the kitchen was spotless.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was still a wet mop around, which indicated somebody had cleaned something very recently.
Laci was mopping the floors when I left that morning. Yes, the house is spotless. She had a cleaning lady on Monday, the 23rd.
So if the cleaning lady had been there, why have to clean again?
Dog, 2 cats, muddy backyard.
You haven't mentioned your son.
It's so hard. It seems like it's a waste of manpower in that pursuit. And that's unfortunate. That makes me sad more than it does angry. You know, when they were out there in the arena and I heard his 88 officers, those are 88 officers which could have been following up on investigative leads. I'm sure there's, you know, my blood everywhere in that truck. I work on a farm with machineries, and you know, everyone that I've done media with, you know, looked at the scars and cuts on my hands, and I'm afraid, you know, men, we cut each other and we bleed. Obviously not a positive thing. And, you know, I think the real question that you're getting at, and that everyone wants to know is, you know, did that precipitate to me being involved with her disappearance? And no, it did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with Laci's disappearance.
Gloria, I'm not sure what he's going to say to Peacock. Probably a lot of the same, that he just didn't do it. He didn't take the stand.
I might add, but
Yeah,
what you showed, it says admitted into evidence. So I think that was offered by the prosecution at the trial to help to prove their case as evidence, and it was admitted. So it didn't help him to do those interviews.
No, not at all. In fact, the hatred for him just escalated after those interviews. People couldn't imagine, just thought he was full of it. Your client, Amber Frey, did testify and just knocked it out of the park. It changed the case. It went from, it looked like Garagos had a lot of momentum, and boom, it was over. Would she be, would she do it again if she had to? Have you talked to her lately? What's her life like?
She has indicated that if it were necessary, she would do it again if there was another trial, because she has said, Ted, the truth is the truth, and it doesn't change with the passage of time. So she would testify truthfully, as she did the last time when she testified, and she's always been very brave, very courageous. When she secretly taped Scott Peterson, and he didn't know it, and she did it at the request of law enforcement, and that those tapes definitely had a negative impact on Scott Peterson. He was not only a killer, he was also a liar. And the argument that, well, he's an adulterer, but that doesn't mean he's a murderer, that's true. But evidence proved that he was a murderer, again, affirmed by the California Supreme Court. So I have confidence in her that she would be a powerful witness once again if there were a new trial. And by the way, just because if they find someone else's DNA on the tape, I don't know why that would necessarily mean he absolutely has to have a new trial, because, it still has to be proven. Could someone else have put the tape around her pants? I don't know. So I'll leave that to the court to decide.
Philip, if indeed it comes back, let's say it comes back to someone they can't track down, do you think that would be enough for a new trial?
Oh, that's a great question, Ted. And just so viewers understand that when these test results come back, and let's say they do identify some unknown donor or contributor of that DNA, the court can make an order that the DNA profile be uploaded into CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Databank. And what they will do is see if there are any hits. You never know. It could be that whoever has DNA on that tape, other than Scott Peterson, hopefully his isn't on there, otherwise we would have gone through this whole charade for nothing. But let's just assume there's some unknown donor's DNA on there, and there's a hit. The standard is, Ted, would there be a more favorable verdict had this DNA been available at the outset? So I think that would be compelling evidence that here on the adhesive portion of tape that's stuck to her pant leg, it has remained there in evidence all these years. It does not match Scott, but matches somebody else. I don't see how a jury could convict. I think that would raise reasonable doubt for a jury.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. Gloria, bottom line it for us, do you think this is just a charade and a continuation? I know Sharon Rocha released a statement during these last hearings expressing her frustration that this just will not go away. And on the other side of the coin, you mentioned Janie Peterson, his sister-in-law. She went and got a law degree. And she's absolutely convinced that he did not do this. And does that say something? I mean, this 20 years later, she's still convinced. You got enough time to really think it through. What's your take on that?
Well, her opinion, of course, is not evidence. But again, it really depends on what the judge decides. I don't know that she is absolutely mandated to grant a new trial if someone else's DNA is discovered on it. We'll have to wait and see. And I can't say that automatically that a jury, if there were a new trial, seeing this evidence with someone else's DNA, if in fact that's what the DNA test shows, would necessarily change their mind and decide that there's not enough proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They can look at all of the evidence, and of course that would have to be admitted, probably over objection. But in any event, we'll see what the jury decides. They're going to look at all the evidence, not just one piece of evidence. And even if it's somebody else's DNA, they could decide there's enough evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't predict what juries will do because I don't have a crystal ball, and you never know what a jury's going to do. But I'm just saying I don't buy that it will necessarily, A, be a new trial if that is found, and B, if there is, that he will not be convicted again.
All right, Janie Peterson has said on this program that if he gets a new trial, there is no way another jury would find him guilty, as the first one did. But we are eons away from that taking place. We're waiting on the test results and then everything in between. And first up, it'll be that documentary on Peacock. I don't know if you'll be watching, Gloria, but we'll talk to you afterwards and get your opinion. You as well, Philip.
Yeah, I'll watch it. By the way, just because the LA Innocence Project took his case doesn't mean that he will be found innocent or that someone else's DNA will be discovered on the tape. And there have been cases they've taken where they did not have enough evidence to prove that their client was factually innocent.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, thank you both. Gloria, Philip, enjoy your weekends. Thank you for your valuable time. We're going to get a break in here. When we come back, the think tank is going to join us. Plus, here's a preview of what's coming up in our next hour here on Closing Arguments.
Chad Doorman, accused in the execution style of his 3 young sons, appears in court today for a surprise plea. We'll bring you the biggest moments from today's hearing.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan.
In every story, in every trial, every case, there's at least 2 sides to it.
To dive into the latest.
Oh my God.
And breaking true crime stories.
This was a very targeted, very personal attack.
Inside.
I've never seen that in Discovery. I've been incarcerated 3 years.
And outside of the courtroom.
She's a psychopath.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Starting Monday night, 9/8 Central on Court TV.
Is that correct, Mr. Peterson? You're pleading not guilty to the 2 charges of murder plus the special, denying the special allegations?
Absolutely. That's correct, Your Honor. I'm innocent.
That was Scott Peterson in court more than 20 years ago, proclaiming his innocence. And even after 2 decades behind bars, he hasn't changed the story at all. Now, the LA Innocence Project has taken on Peterson's case in an attempt to get him a new trial. The defense requested dozens of items to be tested for DNA. And in July, the judge overseeing the case ruled that a single piece of duct tape submitted to a lab for testing would be it. All the other items they wanted to test, the judge said no. But they are testing this one. In their motion for the testing, the defense wrote about this piece of tape. In a strip of duct tape approximately 15 inches long was found adhered to Laci's pants on her right thigh in 2004. A section of the duct tape that was folded over onto itself underwent DNA testing, and the presence of human DNA was found, but no DNA profile could be obtained. Given that human DNA was obtained and only a small portion of the duct tape found on Laci's pants, there is a good reason to believe broader sampling with improved methods and more sensitive DNA testing may reveal probative results. Let's bring in the think tank, see what they think about it. Chief Public Defender for Oakland County, Michigan, who represented the Oxford High School shooter, Paulette Lofton, is with us tonight, and former senior homicide prosecutor and founder of the Villalona law firm, Bernarda Villalona. Good to see you, Bernarda. And finally, the guy that represented Johnny Depp in his defamation case, fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Ben Chu. Welcome to all of you. Let's start, Paulette, with you. What's your take on the significance or maybe no significance of this duct tape and the fact that the judge is saying, fine, go ahead and test it?
You know, I definitely think this is giving him an opportunity that he didn't have before. Obviously, testing has improved in the last 20 years. I do have some concern. Obviously, we know that there was water, that she was submerged. So I don't know if any of the DNA would have held up. But I think this is a chance for him, a definite win for the Innocence Project. And as you discussed earlier, I think if there is results that are found on that piece of duct tape, then I think the judge is going to be more likely to expand what can be tested. There was 17 items that they requested. They gave their reasoning and what they thought those items would prove or how they could help solve who actually committed this crime. And I think if they win on the duct tape, I definitely think the judge would reconsider testing all of those items. And I do think that would warrant a new trial, especially if a DNA match is hit in CODIS and there is a person out there. I definitely think that would be a strong argument for the Innocence Project to make.
Bernardo, what if under that scenario there is no hit and it's just, all right, some stranger DNA? That actually might help Peterson, because if it hits in CODIS and that person is investigating, well, I lived in New York during that period of time, it might be a dead end. The unknown might help him too, if indeed it comes back.
Absolutely. So it's all going to fall down to what the results of that testing is going to be. Because what if they do test more pieces of that duct tape and they find that there is no DNA profile that can be developed? So therefore, then it leaves the case exactly where we started, still with the same conviction because nothing has changed. However, if they find the DNA profile of another individual, whether they're able to match it to a person or not match it to someone else, it still is a piece of exculpatory evidence, and it's something that would have changed the outcome of the trial, and he will be entitled to a new trial. For now, we just have to wait and see what the results of this testing is going to be. Of course, it gives Scott Peterson some hope. Unfortunately for the family, I'm sure that they're on pins and needles because they may have to relive this trial again if a new trial is granted.
Yeah, they have been through so much and continue. This keeps coming up. Ben, why does it keep coming up? Why is Peacock interested? Netflix is also doing a limited series on this coming out later this year. What is it about this case that has just enduring attention?
Ted, it's a great question. It really captured the imagination of people 20 years ago. And when I first saw that you were doing this segment, it was hard for me to believe that it really was that long ago. But it was a high-profile case there, and a few people or some people seem to have some doubts. So this gives him at least a small ray of potential hope.
Paulette, what do you think of him doing this interview on the documentary coming out on Peacock?
As a defense attorney, that makes me so extremely nervous, especially seeing the clips from the last two interviews that you played in your last segment. He did not do well in those interviews. Those interviews did not help him at all. So if his manner and demeanor, so laid back that it was almost creepy, is how it's going to be this time, I think it will hurt him. Also, if he is so sure that there is going to be evidence that's going to get him a new trial, it is not a good idea to put yourself in front of the world in these interviews when a jury is going to be deciding your fate. I think it's a bad move.
Yeah, I did one of those interviews that we just saw clips of, that, not the Diane Sawyer one, the other one, obviously Bernardo, and he was in control. He made us take our shoes off. We came into his house and it was very 15 minutes, just one light, take your shoes off, and my photographer and I were like, all right, take our shoes off, and it was bizarre, and he had this weird confidence. They tested him during the trial with some mock mock cross, and it was decided, no way, this guy's not getting up on the witness stand. Do you agree with Paulette, Bernardo, this is a bad idea on some level, especially given the momentum of the LA Innocence Project now taking on his case?
Exactly. If I was Scott Peterson's attorney, I would definitely recommend against him giving any interview, because number one, we have to wait and see what's going to happen with this testing of this piece of tape. Also, if there is a chance of a new trial, even if Scott Peterson does not testify, any interview that he has given and does give can still be used against him. A prosecutor can still put that forth in front of a jury to show his demeanor, the type of person he is, or if he inculpates himself in any way. Also, with the new testing, we don't know what other new evidence can come about it, and he doesn't know the answers to it. So for him to open up this can of worms is not recommended. Scott Peterson shouldn't be giving any more interviews at all. Let things play out. let's see the finality of all these appeals that he's making before he decides he wants to give interviews. And then also, is he even making money off of this? Because usually in majority of states, you can't profit off your crime. So there's no incentive for him to give these interviews.
Yeah, all that will eventually come out. It always does. We'll have to see. Again, that limited series on Peacock debuts in August, end of August. Oh, it is August. So, yeah, coming up, a couple weeks.